Episode 245. What if we have two boys? Jake gradually calmed down, put on his clothes, and opened the door to return to his room. As soon as he entered, he saw a small bulge on the bed. Going forward, he gently lifted the quilt, and at a glance he saw the small head of Serena, with her hair messy. She opened her reddish and moist eyes. He lifted her up and whispered, "What's wrong?" She ignored him, flicked his hand away, and lay down. He took off his shoes and joined her under the quilt. Pretending to be dumb, he said, "Are we looking for treasures here, huh?" He climbed inside, suddenly cuddled her, and glanced at her face. He sounded pleasantly surprised. "A treasure for real. So precious." Serena broke into laughter, but deliberately put on a stern face and pushed him. "Go away!" "I still want to see the treasure. I won't go." Jake deliberately moved in her direction and held her tight. She twisted her body, turned and reached out to remove his clothes. He was a bit stiff, holding her, and said, "I haven't taken a shower yet." She ignored it. Wriggling free, she took off his jacket. He could not persuade her, simply lay flat and took her into his arms. He whispered, "Shall we sleep? I didn't sleep last night." "Let me look at it," Serena whimpered. "How's the injury? Why don't you show it to me?" Knowing that he couldn't keep it a secret, he whispered, "It's just a little scratch, it's okay." "Get up, let me see." Jake couldn't bear to see her cry. He had to sit up and take off his t-shirt. Serena saw the red grazes all over his body. Some of them were swollen and bleeding, but not serious in general. Finally, she let out a sigh of relief. She reached out and pressed his skin. He frowned and looked at her directly. "Well deserved." Serena did not mean it. Then she pressed him down. "Don't shower. You just had it bandaged and cleaned. Sleep now." Since she had seen it all, Jake was no longer afraid. Pulling her close, he bowed down and kissed her. Although she was kissed suddenly, she had already gotten used to his attacks. Holding his neck, she responded ineptly. Jake was somewhat pleasantly surprised by her response. The shallow kiss became more and more deep, and the tip of his tongue touched her lips and went into the depths. Gradually, his lips moved down to her chin, her neck and her collarbone. He was like a devout believer, worshipping his faith. Serena's heart leapt, and her breathing became more and more rapid. She reached out and pushed him. "You are still—" "There is no injury there." Jake's lips were stuck on her skin, and his voice was a bit vague. "I can continue." "Lewd!" She blushed. He pushed her top up. His voice was low and charming. "That I am, but only for you." Serena held his neck tighter, curling up her pink toes. "The first trimester is over at last. It's been so hard for me." Don't bite there." "Here it goes." Jake had never restrained himself as much as he did that day, careful not to hurt her and the baby. But after all, there had been no sex for him in several days. As it got more and more heated, he disregarded the pain on his hands and fell on the bed with her in his arms. But he made sure that he did not touch her belly. The baby was now more than 3 months old, and her belly was showing. It was bigger than ordinary bellies in their 3rd month. He looked at her belly and couldn't help but reach out and touch it. He said, "Is it possible that you are actually having twins? A boy and a girl?" "I don't know." Serena saw his idiotic expression and smiled. It takes 4 months before we can find out. And the doctor will not tell us the gender, afraid that we might have a preference. Jake looked at her belly and could not help smiling. Finally, lying beside her and taking her into his arms, he whispered, "Well, I hope it's a boy and a girl. Or we have 2 girls. That will be great too." "How do boys offend you?" "Boys are hard to manage. I heard that my mother almost went crazy, having to take care of me and my 2 brothers." All the 3 Robinson brothers were really naughty while growing up. Each of them had a different personality, but when they all got together it was out of hand. Jake was the most rebellious. Keith was no good either, always getting into trouble. Although Alex looked like a good boy, he was actually the one who filled his brothers' heads with bad ideas, and worse than his 2 younger brothers. Thinking of the possibility of his wife having 2 boys who would be as naughty as them, he felt it would be quite a daunting task. "If we are really having 2 boys, you will have to put up with them." Serena squeezed his nose. "Boys and girls are the same." When Jake was going to say something, she pinched his mouth and looked majestic. "Now sleep." Sleep it is. Having stayed up all night in an intense environment, he was very exhausted. He fell asleep comfortably with his wife. When she woke up, Serena didn't know where to go. She glanced at the small alarm clock next to the bed and found it was past 6 p.m. Jake's phone had been constantly vibrating. He rubbed his head, picked up the phone on the bedside, and saw dozens of missed calls. As soon as he picked it up, Miranda's call came through. "Boss?" "Yeah?" He responded, and hurting himself when he stretched. He quickly put his hands down. "Lila Cox has run away, this afternoon around 3 o'clock. She hit the nurse, took her clothes, and disguised herself and ran away." Jake heard the news, and his groggy eyes suddenly became sharp. "Didn't I tell you to reinforce the guards?" "Yes, I did, but—" "Is she caught?" "No, she got away. Someone outside picked her up and took her into a car directly." "Damn it!" Miranda didn't dare to speak. Jake seemed to have calmed himself down and asked, "What about Stephen Wrong?" "Stephen? What about him?" "It best have nothing to do with him." Otherwise, he would not take into account the relationship between him and Miranda. The consequences for this, if he was involved, would be grave. Miranda knew that it was serious, became alert, and said immediately, "No, Stephen has already broken his relationship with her. It is impossible for him to do it." Jake became silent, and then said, "Then ask him to come work for the Robinson Group alongside you. You can manage him. He can have a salary as well. It's better he stays under our gaze and helps us out. Nobody knows Lila the way he does. You will be his immediate superior. Ask him and let him think about it."